The Wizard of Oz, 1939, is a timeless classic that has enchanted generations with its unforgettable characters, vibrant Technicolor, and heartfelt message about home. But behind the scenes of this cinematic masterpiece lies a much darker tale, one filled with tragedy, misfortune, and heartbreak. In this video, we take a closer look at the lives of the actors who helped make this film so iconic, and the often tragic fates that befell them. From Judy Garland's painful personal battles to the mysterious and sometimes grim stories of her co-stars, discover what really happened to the beloved cast of The Wizard of Oz after the yellow brick road ended. Judy Garland was born on June 10, 1922, and played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 at the age of 17. She portrayed a wide-eyed, innocent girl swept into a fantastical land, embodying kindness, courage, and an aching desire to return home. The success of her performance brought Judy stardom, but it came at an unbearable price. MGM forced her onto amphetamines to maintain her energy and suppress her appetite, initiating a lifelong addiction. Her later career was a painful seesaw. Triumphs like A Star Is Born were shadowed by humiliations, canceled shows, and public breakdowns. Her personal life was tumultuous and cruel. Garland married 5 times, first to composer David Rose, then to Vincente Minnelli, with whom she had her daughter Liza, followed by unions with Sid Luft, Mark Herron, and Mickey Deans. Each marriage began in hope and ended in betrayal, abuse, or despair. She had 3 children, Liza Minnelli, Lorna Luft, and Joey Luft, though her relationship with them was strained by her emotional instability and absences. Homelessness, financial ruin, and mental illness stalked her for years. She attempted suicide multiple times and was reportedly kept under lock and key by handlers who saw her as a commodity rather than a woman. Garland died on June 22, 1969, at the age of 47, from an accidental barbiturate overdose in a rented London flat. Ray Bolger, born on January 10, 1904, stepped into the role of Hunk in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 when he was 35. In Oz, Hunk becomes the Scarecrow, lanky, loyal, and quick-witted despite believing himself to be brainless. But behind the joyful dance was a man perpetually haunted by self-doubt and professional insecurity. While he found some success on Broadway and in vaudeville, he never quite escaped the shadow of the Scarecrow. Offers dwindled, and he was often typecast, growing bitter about the industry's limitations. His marriage to Gwendolyn Ricard lasted until his death, but they never had children, and behind the public smiles, the couple lived more like roommates than lovers, emotionally distant and with separate lives. Bolger suffered in silence, watching his peers move on to new fame while he replayed the same scenes in interviews and guest spots. 2 deep wounds marked his life: the guilt over being chosen for Oz while his friend Buddy Ebsen, originally cast as the Tin Man, nearly died from makeup poisoning, and the depression he faced in his later years when forgotten by a younger audience. Ray Bolger died on January 15, 1987, at the age of 83 from bladder cancer. Bert Lahr was born on August 13, 1895, and became Zeke, the Cowardly Lion, in The Wizard of Oz at age 44. His portrayal of the lion was unforgettable, jittery, lovable, loud, yet yearning to be brave. Lahr's performance was built on his vaudeville background, and while audiences adored the Cowardly Lion, few knew how much pain hid behind the exaggerated roars. Lahr's career had highlights, including Waiting for Godot and numerous stage successes, but he never felt truly accepted by critics, who often dismissed him as buffoonish. His marriage to Mildred Schroeder was riddled with arguments and separations. They had 1 son, John, but Bert's erratic mood swings and depression created a cold and fractured family life. Off-camera, he was a perfectionist consumed by self-hatred, obsessing over his performances until they drove him to physical exhaustion. He suffered from chronic insomnia and anxiety, worsened by the heavy, claustrophobic Cowardly Lion costume that caused him to overheat and faint repeatedly during filming. By the 1960s, Lahr was nearly forgotten, a relic of the past battling irrelevance. One of his greatest torments was watching younger comics steal the spotlight, while he was left to perform tired routines in second-rate venues. Bert Lahr died on December 4, 1967, at the age of 72, from pneumonia. Billie Burke was born on August 7, 1884, and played the role of Glinda in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 at the age of 55, bringing elegance and otherworldly charm to the Good Witch of the North. Off-screen, however, Billie's career, which began in silent films and vaudeville, was both celebrated and tormented. Though she found fame in the 1930s for her comic roles, especially in the Topper films, she was constantly overshadowed by her husband, Broadway legend Florenz Ziegfeld. After his sudden death in 1932, she was left with massive debts, struggling to maintain appearances in high society while quietly sinking into financial ruin. Her personal life bore the strain of this loss. She had one daughter, Patricia, whose distant relationship with her only heightened Billie's sense of loneliness. Her marriage, though publicized as a golden union, was marked by long periods of separation and emotional detachment, exacerbated by Ziegfeld's chronic infidelity. Billie suffered through depression in silence, battling feelings of irrelevance as she aged out of Hollywood's spotlight. Her elegant image was a veil for the painful isolation she endured in her later years, as she retreated into seclusion, surrounded by memories but void of companionship. She died on May 14, 1970, at the age of 85 from natural causes. Jack Haley, born August 10, 1897, was 42 when he played Hickory in The Wizard of Oz in 1939. In Oz, Hickory became the Tin Man, a soft-spoken, affectionate soul who believed he lacked a heart. Ironically, Haley's own life was marked by an aching emotional void. Though he enjoyed success in films like Alexander's Ragtime Band and Poor Little Rich Girl, his career was marred by an unending sense of replaceability. He had, after all, only taken the Tin Man role after Buddy Ebsen suffered a near-fatal reaction to the original makeup. His work was often described as safe and mechanical, critiques that ate away at his confidence. Married to Florence McFadden, Haley had 2 children, including Jack Haley Jr., who later married Liza Minnelli, Judy Garland's daughter. Despite this Hollywood connection, Haley remained distant from his family, often drowning himself in rehearsals and television work to avoid emotional closeness. He was a man who smiled for the public but cried in private, battling crippling insecurity and bouts of depression. In his later years, he became reclusive, refusing interviews and avoiding public appearances. He carried deep guilt about the injuries Ebsen endured in his place and reportedly never forgave himself for profiting from another man's suffering. Jack Haley died on June 6, 1979, from a heart attack at the age of 81. Margaret Hamilton, born December 9, 1902, brought terrifying vitality to her role as Miss Gulch and the Wicked Witch of the West in 1939's The Wizard of Oz at the age of 37. Yet behind the green paint was a woman tormented by the chasm between fame and fulfillment. Margaret's career, though respected, was consistently boxed into villainous roles that denied her range, typecasting her into frightening caricatures that haunted her personal aspirations. Off-screen, Margaret's life was weighed down by heartbreak. She married Paul Boynton Meserve in 1931, but the marriage disintegrated within 5 years, leaving her to raise their only son, Hamilton Wadsworth Meserve, alone. The divorce devastated her emotionally, and though she rarely spoke of it publicly, letters revealed a profound sense of failure and abandonment. The demands of single motherhood clashed with a relentless Hollywood schedule, forcing her to sacrifice closeness with her son. For decades, she lived in modest obscurity, plagued by burn scars sustained during filming when a pyrotechnic mishap nearly cost her life. She was never fully compensated for the trauma. The incident left her with lingering physical and psychological pain, which she carried quietly as she made appearances for children, often apologizing for frightening them. Margaret died on May 16, 1985, at the age of 82 from a heart attack. Clara Blandick, born on June 4, 1876, portrayed Auntie Em in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 at the age of 63, giving life to the character who served as Dorothy's moral compass and symbol of home. Her acting career spanned over 40 years, with more than 100 film credits, but she was never offered leading roles, always relegated to background parts and older women, something she resented bitterly. Though she was never married and had no children, Clara often fabricated stories of suitors and fictional engagements in interviews to hide her painful solitude. Her family life had always been unstable. Her parents were missionaries who dragged her between continents during her childhood, and she often spoke of feeling unmoored and forgotten. As she aged, her eyesight began to fail and debilitating arthritis took hold of her limbs, rendering her unable to work or live independently. With no close relatives or companions, she sank into a deep depression. In a meticulously planned act, she donned a royal blue dressing gown, arranged her room with photographs and awards, and overdosed on sleeping pills before tying a plastic bag over her head. Clara died by suicide on April 15, 1962, at the age of 85, alone in her small Los Angeles apartment, a woman once adored as Auntie M, finally undone by a lifetime of invisibility. Dorothy Barrett was born on February 3, 1917, and played the role of the Emerald City manicurist in 1939 at the age of 22, bringing a touch of elegant whimsy to the splendor of Emerald City. Off-screen, however, Dorothy's life was far from the colorful world of make-believe she briefly inhabited. After her small roles in Hollywood, her acting career faded into obscurity, never achieving the breakthrough she had once dreamed of. She mostly worked as an extra or uncredited character, which left her emotionally and financially unstable. Her personal life, like her career, was quietly tragic. She married young to a production assistant named Edward Clark, but the marriage was riddled with neglect and infidelity. They had one child, a daughter named Lillian, whom Dorothy struggled to support emotionally as the pressure of failed dreams crushed her spirit. The home was cold, not from lack of heat, but from the absence of joy. After years of quiet desperation, Lillian moved away and became estranged, leaving Dorothy increasingly isolated in her later years. Depression and feelings of failure haunted her long after Hollywood had forgotten her name. At one point in her 40s, she was institutionalized briefly after a breakdown triggered by the news that her former husband had remarried and started a new family. She passed away on March 8, 2018, at the age of 101 from natural causes. Pat Walsh was born on July 26, 1900, and stepped into the mischievous role of Nico, the leader of the Winged Monkeys, in 1939's The Wizard of Oz at age 39. Nico never spoke a word, yet his eerie screeches and wild movements became unforgettable, a product of Walsh's long experience as a vaudeville animal impersonator. Standing at just 3 feet 11 inches tall, Pat spent much of his life fighting societal cruelty and exploitation, his talents often reduced to spectacle rather than art. His stage career started young, but his roles were humiliating: animal mimicry, comic dwarfs, and background oddities. Despite a few bright spots on Broadway and a brief flicker of recognition from Oz, Pat never found consistent success in Hollywood. He never married, often citing the impossibility of being seen as a romantic or worthy partner due to his stature. He had no children, and close friends recalled how deeply this pained him, as he was known to write letters to imaginary sons in his journals, detailing the life he wished he could have shared. The industry typecast him cruelly, and after Oz, meaningful work vanished. He lived alone in Los Angeles, suffering from severe arthritis in later years that left him nearly immobile and in constant pain. Pat Walsh died on December 11, 1991, at the age of 91 from a heart attack. Charlie Grapewin, born on December 20, 1869, took on the role of Uncle Henry in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 at the age of 70, portraying a gentle and simple farmer who offers grounding affection to young Dorothy. Uncle Henry may have seemed unassuming, but Grapewin infused him with the silent wisdom of age and the quiet burden of rural hardship. Before reaching this iconic role, Charlie's life was a patchwork of restless wandering. He started as a circus acrobat, traveling from tent to tent, sleeping in boxcars, and barely scraping by. His film career bloomed late, which brought him financial security, but not peace. He married actress Anna Chance in the 1890s, and while their union endured, it was one of deep sadness. The couple remained childless, a fact that reportedly haunted Grapewin, who longed for family stability after a youth marked by loss and transience. His heartache grew after Anna's health began to deteriorate in the 1940s, and he withdrew from public life to care for her until her death, a loss from which he never recovered. Despite his soft on-screen persona, he battled chronic respiratory illness for years, the result of decades working in dusty, poorly ventilated theaters. He died on February 2, 1956, at the age of 86 from natural causes, his final years spent alone in quiet obscurity, surrounded only by relics of a life spent chasing fleeting applause. Frank Morgan, born on June 1, 1890, took on the role of Professor Marvel in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 at the age of 49. His character was a lovable conman, full of charm and mystery, who masked his good intentions behind a facade of smoke and mirrors. The role suited him perfectly, as Morgan was a versatile character actor who played multiple roles in the film. He had a long and steady career, known for his work in The Affairs of Cellini and The Shop Around the Corner, yet he never quite reached the heights of Hollywood's elite. Off-screen, his life was far less magical. Frank was married to Alma Muller, and they had one son, but their marriage was plagued by his alcoholism and infidelities. Morgan was known for showing up to sets drunk and often berated by directors who questioned whether he'd survive another production. His alcoholism was a constant demon, one that strained his family relationships and contributed to a deep loneliness that fame could not mask. In his later years, he reportedly grew paranoid and anxious, isolating himself from friends and colleagues. The weight of maintaining his image wore him down, and the sparkle in his eyes dimmed as he battled his inner demons. Frank Morgan died on September 18, 1949, at the age of 59, from a heart attack, alone and weary, after years of quietly drinking himself into obscurity. Harry Bernard was born on January 13, 1878, and took on the role of a Munchkin villager in the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz when he was 61 years old, infusing the jubilant Munchkinland with the energy of community celebration. But behind the painted smiles and colorful sets, Harry carried the weight of a deeply fractured personal life. A former vaudeville performer, his early career was cut short by the transition to silent films, where he played bit parts, rarely with credit. His declining relevance in the sound era left him struggling financially. Harry married only once, to a seamstress named Margaret Lacey, but their union was brief and bitter. They had two sons, both of whom died young, one of pneumonia and the other in a streetcar accident. The grief drove Margaret to leave him, and Harry spiraled into heavy drinking. His work in Oz was one of the few highlights in a bleak final decade, though he barely spoke of it afterward. By the late 1930s, he was living in a boarding house, often borrowing money from fellow actors just to eat. He suffered from chronic heart issues and anxiety, made worse by malnutrition and alcoholism. In one of his last letters, found after his death, he wrote, "The world clapped when I danced, but they turned away when I cried." Harry Bernard died from a heart attack on November 4, 1940, at the age of 62. Buster Brodie, born on October 11, 1885, portrayed one of the eerie winged monkeys in The Wizard of Oz when he was 54 years old. The winged monkeys, fierce and enslaved by the Wicked Witch, represent both whimsy and menace, a blend that mirrored the duality in Buster's own tormented existence. A vaudeville performer turned background actor, Buster had an unusual appearance due to his short stature and gaunt features, which made him ideal for peculiar or grotesque roles but never for stardom. He lived a largely anonymous life in Hollywood, never marrying, and many suspected he was a closeted gay man in an era when even a whisper of such truth could ruin a career. He had a long-term companion named J.D. whose real identity was never officially confirmed, but their relationship was kept so secret that even Buster's closest friends weren't sure. When J.D. died suddenly in 1935, Buster was reportedly inconsolable and never truly recovered. By the time he worked on Oz, he was already descending into chronic depression. He would sit alone during breaks, avoiding conversation, often sketching images of birds and cages. His final years were marked by poverty and isolation. An incident in 1947 involving a fall left him hospitalized, where he repeatedly mumbled lines from long-forgotten roles. He passed away on January 9, 1948, from a heart attack at the age of 62. Billie Bletcher, born on September 24, 1894, gave voice to the mayor of Munchkinland, one of the most iconic members of the Lollipop Guild, in 1939 when he was 45 years old. A prolific voice actor, Billie worked tirelessly in early animation, lending his talents to countless cartoons including Disney and Warner Brothers classics. Despite these accomplishments, his contributions often went uncredited, and he rarely received the recognition he deserved. He married actress Arlene Roberts, and while their union appeared stable in public, privately it was plagued by financial struggles and emotional distance. They had one son, Peter, who was born with developmental disabilities. Billie's efforts to provide for his family were relentless, but he was consumed by guilt for being emotionally absent and working constantly. As the animation industry evolved, Billie found fewer roles and became embittered by the lack of respect for voice actors. In his final years, he lived in a modest home filled with reel tapes and scripts, his only friends being industry relics and long-forgotten cartoon memorabilia. He suffered a nervous breakdown in the early 1970s, haunted by what he called a life of echoes, heard but unseen. Billie Bletcher died on January 5, 1979, at the age of 84 from natural causes. Tyler Brooke was born on June 6, 1886, and joined the ranks of the fantastical Ozmites in The Wizard of Oz in 1939 at age 53, adding a fleeting but necessary presence to the bustling world of Oz. Known for his elegant bearing and theatrical flair, Tyler's career began in silent films and vaudeville, where his charm and wit won him roles in dozens of comedies throughout the 1920s. But the advent of sound films revealed a harsh truth: his voice, considered too shrill and stagey, led to an abrupt decline in opportunities. He married a socialite named Evelyn Drake, and though they were the toast of Los Angeles for a time, the facade of glamour masked a marriage racked by infidelity, emotional neglect, and substance abuse. Evelyn suffered 2 miscarriages, and they never had children. After a violent public argument in 1935, Evelyn left him, taking most of his wealth. Tyler turned to alcohol and became a reclusive figure, living in cheap hotels and occasionally doing voice work under aliases. By the early 1940s, his health was in rapid decline, exacerbated by years of binge drinking and untreated diabetes. In a desperate letter to an old producer, he wrote, "I used to make people laugh, now I can't even make myself cry." Tyler Brooke died from a heart attack on March 2, 1943, at the age of 56. Enthusiasts. Who is your favorite character in The Wizard of Oz? How do you feel knowing that the actors have passed away? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much.